Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you gave them the keys to your entire world, only to discover later that they were slowly, methodically destroying everything you loved from the inside? My name is Emma, and this is the story of how my stepmother almost tore my family apart with lies so carefully crafted, so perfectly delivered, that we didn't see the truth until it was almost too late. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, back to the moment when everything seemed perfect, back to the day my father introduced us to the woman who would change our lives forever. I was 17 when my mother passed away. Cancer. It was the kind of grief that doesn't just break you, it reshapes you entirely. My father, my younger brother Daniel, who was 14 at the time, and we were shattered. Our home felt hollow. Dinners became silent. Laughter became a distant memory. For 2 years, we existed in this fog of grief. My father threw himself into work, Daniel withdrew into video games and his room, and I became the glue trying to hold our broken pieces together. I cooked meals no one ate, I cleaned rooms no one noticed, I tried to be the mother, the daughter, the sister all at once. Then, on a cold November evening, my father came home with a spark in his eyes I hadn't seen since before Mom got sick. He asked us to sit down. He had something important to tell us. "Kids," he said, his voice nervous but hopeful, "I've met someone." Her name was Victoria. She was 42, 8 years younger than my father, a teacher at a private school across town. He'd met her at a charity fundraiser 6 months earlier. They'd been dating quietly, he explained, because he wanted to be sure before introducing us to us. He wanted to make sure she was the one. I remember the knot that formed in my stomach. Not because I didn't want my father to be happy. I did, desperately. But because I was terrified of change, terrified of betraying my mother's memory, terrified of letting someone new into our sacred, broken circle. Daniel said nothing, he just stared at the floor. "I know this is hard," Dad continued, his eyes pleading with us to understand. "But Victoria, she's special. She's kind, she's patient, and she understands what we've been through. I think you'll really like her." 2 weeks later, Victoria came to dinner. I'll never forget that first impression. She walked through our door like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. She wore a simple blue dress, carried a homemade apple pie, and had the warmest smile I'd ever seen. Her hair was light brown with natural waves, and she had these soft green eyes that seemed to radiate genuine kindness. "You must be Emma," she said, taking my hands in hers. "Your father has told me so much about you. He's so proud of the woman you're becoming." She hugged me, not an awkward, forced hug, but a real one, the kind that feels like coming home. Then she turned to Daniel, who was hovering in the doorway like a suspicious cat. Instead of pushing, she simply smiled. "And you're Daniel, the gaming expert, right? Your dad mentioned you're pretty unbeatable at Fortnite. Maybe you could give me some tips sometime. I'm hopeless at video games." Daniel's defenses softened, just a little, but it was enough. That dinner was nice. Victoria asked questions without prying. She shared stories about her own family, her parents who lived in Oregon, her sister who was a veterinarian, her nephew she adored. She laughed at Dad's terrible jokes. She complimented my cooking. She didn't try too hard. She just was. By the end of the evening, I found myself thinking maybe this could work. Maybe we could be happy again. Over the next few months, Victoria became a regular presence in our lives. She'd come over for dinners, join us for movie nights, help me with college applications. She never tried to replace our mother. She never even suggested it. Instead, she carved out her own space in our family, gentle, supportive, present. My father was transformed. The grief that had weighed him down for years began to lift. He smiled more, laughed more, came home earlier. It was like watching someone wake up from a long... After the ceremony, Victoria pulled Daniel and me aside. "I want you both to know something," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not here to replace your mother. No one ever could. But I promise you this. I will love your father with everything I have, and I will do everything in my power to support you both, to be here for you, to help this family heal and grow. You're not just gaining a stepmother, you're gaining someone who genuinely cares about you." I believed her, completely. That was my first mistake, because what I didn't know then, what none of us knew, was that Victoria's perfect exterior was hiding something darker, something calculated, something that would eventually reveal itself in the most devastating way possible. But in that moment, standing in the golden afternoon light, watching my father dance with his new wife, I thought we'd finally found our way back to happiness. I thought the worst was behind us. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first 6 months after the wedding were like living in a dream. Victoria moved into our house and slowly, carefully, she transformed it. Not drastically, just enough to breathe new life into spaces that had grown stale with grief. She added fresh flowers to the dining table, hung cheerful artwork in the hallways, organized family game nights, made Dad's favorite meals. She even started a tradition of Sunday brunches where we'd all cook together, laughing as flour ended up everywhere except in the mixing bowl. Our house felt like a home again. But looking back now, I realize that's exactly what she wanted us to feel. Comfortable, grateful, unsuspecting. The first crack appeared so subtly that I almost missed it. It was a Tuesday evening. I'd come home from my part-time job at the bookstore to find Victoria in the kitchen on the phone. Her voice was low, almost secretive. When she saw me, she quickly ended the call. "Oh, Emma, I didn't hear you come in," she said, her smile just a fraction too bright. "How was work?" "Fine," I said, setting down my bag. "Everything okay? You seemed intense on the phone." "Just my sister," she said with a dismissive wave. "Family drama, nothing important." I nodded and headed to my room, but something about the interaction felt off. The way she'd ended the call so abruptly, the flash of something, annoyance, worry, that crossed her face before the smile returned. I pushed it aside. Everyone has private conversations, I told myself. Stop being paranoid. The second crack came a few weeks later. Daniel had left his laptop open in the living room. I was walking past when I noticed Victoria sitting on the couch, her eyes fixed on the screen. She was scrolling through something, her expression focused and calculating. "Victoria?" I said. She jumped, slamming the laptop shut. "God, Emma, you scared me." "Sorry," I said, confused by her reaction. "What were you doing?" "Oh, just checking something for Daniel. He asked me to help him with a school project earlier." But Daniel hadn't mentioned any school project, and the way she'd closed that laptop, so quickly, so defensively, it didn't feel right. "Okay," I said, slowly. "Is he around?" "He went to his friend Tyler's house. Should be back for dinner." I nodded and left, but the unease in my stomach grew heavier. That evening, I casually asked Daniel about the school project. He looked at me blankly. "What project?" he said. "The one Victoria was helping you with?" "I didn't ask Victoria for help with anything," he said, frowning. "Why?" I shrugged, trying to keep my tone light. No reason. Must have misunderstood. But I hadn't misunderstood. Victoria had lied. The question was, why? Over the next few months, these small inconsistencies began to pile up. Money started disappearing from my father's wallet. Nothing huge, $20 here, $50 there, enough to notice, but not enough to make a big deal about. When Dad mentioned it, Victoria suggested he was probably just forgetting where he'd spent it. "You've been so busy with work lately, honey, it's easy to lose track." Dad would nod, accepting her explanation, but I noticed how he started checking his wallet more often. Then there was the issue with Dad's mother, my grandmother, Grandma Helen. Grandma Helen had never been Victoria's biggest fan, not because she was unkind, but because she was protective. She'd told me once, quietly, that something about Victoria felt too polished, like she's always performing. I'd defended Victoria then, told Grandma she was being unfair, that Victoria was genuinely trying to fit into our family, but Grandma's doubts planted a seed. Victoria started making excuses whenever we planned visits to see Grandma. She had a headache, she had work to catch up on, she wasn't feeling well. At first, Dad went without her, taking Daniel and me, but gradually Victoria would suggest that Dad looked tired, that he deserved a weekend to relax at home instead. The visits became less frequent. Then, one Sunday, Grandma called. She sounded upset. "Emma, honey, can you come see me, alone?" "Of course, Grandma. Is everything okay?" There was a long pause. "I need to talk to you about something. About Victoria." My heart started racing. "What about her?" "Not over the phone, please. Come tomorrow if you can." I promised I would. That night I couldn't sleep. Grandma's voice had been so serious, so worried. What did she know? What had she discovered? The next day I drove to Grandma's house, telling Victoria I had to run some errands. The lie came easier than I expected. Grandma was waiting on her porch, a cup of tea already prepared. She hugged me tight, then led me inside. "Sweetheart," she began, sitting across from me at her kitchen table, "I don't want to upset you, but I've been investigating Victoria." "Investigating?" I repeated, shocked. Grandma nodded. "I know it sounds extreme, but my instincts kept screaming at me that something wasn't right, so I hired a private investigator." My mouth fell open. "You what?" I know, it sounds crazy, but Emma, what he found." She slid a manila folder across the table to me. "You need to see this." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, bank statements, and the truth they revealed made my blood run cold. Victoria had been married before, twice. Both marriages had ended in messy divorces where she'd walked away with significant financial settlements. Both ex-husbands had accused her of manipulation, of creating situations where they looked like the villains while she played the victim. There were court documents, restraining orders filed by her, later proven to be based on exaggerated or false claims. Financial records showing she'd systematically drained joint accounts before filing for divorce. "She's a con artist," Grandma said quietly, "a sophisticated one. She targets widowers, men who are vulnerable and grieving. She makes them fall in love, marries them, and then bleeds them dry before moving on to the next one." I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. "That's insane. Why would she do this?" "Money," Grandma said simply. "Control. Maybe some sick psychological satisfaction." The investigator said she has a pattern. She typically stays in a marriage for about 2 to 3 years before making her move. I did the math. Victoria and Dad had been married for almost a year. "We have to tell Dad," I said, standing abruptly. Grandma grabbed my wrist. "We will, but we need to be smart about this. If we go to your father now with just these documents, Victoria will spin it. She'll cry, play the victim, say I'm a jealous mother-in-law who never gave her a chance. Your father loves her. He'll want to believe her. So what do we do?" "We watch," Grandma said. "We document. We wait for her to make a mistake, and when she does, we have enough evidence that..." I left her house that day with the folder hidden in my bag and a sick feeling in my stomach. Everything I thought I knew about Victoria, every kind word, every warm smile, every moment of connection, it had all been a lie. And the worst part, she was so good at it that no one else suspected a thing. But I knew now, and I wasn't going to let her destroy my family. The war had begun. Victoria just didn't know it yet. From that day forward, I became someone I barely recognized, someone calculating, careful, always watching. I started keeping a journal, documenting every inconsistency, every lie, every suspicious behavior. I took photos of receipts I found in Victoria's purse when she wasn't looking. I recorded conversations on my phone. I became a spy in my own home. It felt wrong. It felt like betrayal. But then I'd remember those documents in Grandma's folder and I'd push the guilt aside. The first major piece of evidence came 3 weeks after my conversation with Grandma. I was home alone one afternoon, Dad at work, Daniel at baseball practice, Victoria supposedly at a teacher's conference. I'd noticed her laptop sitting on the desk in her and Dad's bedroom. She usually took it everywhere. The fact that she'd left it behind felt like an opportunity. I knew it was an invasion of privacy. I knew it was wrong. I did it anyway. The laptop wasn't password protected. Overconfident, I thought, or maybe she just never expected anyone to go looking. I opened her email first. What I found made my hands shake. There were dozens of emails to someone named Marcus. The messages were intimate, flirtatious, sometimes explicitly romantic. Marcus called her baby. She called him my love. They talked about meeting up, about how much they missed each other, about plans for when this is all over. I felt sick. Victoria was having an affair, but it got worse. I found emails to a lawyer, not just any lawyer, a divorce attorney. The messages dated back 3 months. Victoria was already planning her exit strategy. She was asking about asset division, about how much she could potentially walk away with given the length of the marriage, about what grounds for divorce would be most favorable to her. I need to maximize the settlement, she'd written in one email. He's comfortable financially but not wealthy. I'll need to be strategic about timing and approach. She was talking about my father like he was a business transaction. I took photos of everything with my phone, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Then I found the folder. It was buried in her documents, titled Financial Planning. Inside were spreadsheets tracking my father's income, his savings accounts, his investments, even his retirement fund. She had detailed notes about the house's value, his life insurance policy, everything. She'd been studying his finances like a predator studying prey. But the most damning thing I found was a document titled Timeline. It was a step-by-step plan for how she intended to execute her divorce and maximize her payout. Step 1. Build evidence of emotional neglect. Establish pattern of him prioritizing work over family. Step 2. Create documentation of financial control. Establish that he limited her access to accounts, which was a lie. Dad had put her name on everything. Step 3. Dependency. Show she gave up career opportunities to support his family. Step 4. Strategic confrontation. Initiate divorce proceedings after 2-year mark, optimal for settlement. She'd been planning this from the beginning, maybe even before the wedding. I photographed everything, then carefully closed the laptop, making sure everything looked exactly as I'd found it. When Victoria came home 2 hours later, I was in the living room pretending to study. She smiled at me warmly. "How's the homework going, sweetie?" "Fine," I said, returning her smile even though I wanted to scream. That evening, I met Grandma at a coffee shop across town. I showed her the photos. Her face went white. "Oh, Emma, this is worse than I thought." "We have to tell Dad now," I insisted. "We have proof, clear, undeniable proof." Grandma was quiet for a long moment, studying the photos on my phone. "You're right. We have evidence of infidelity and premeditated fraud. But Emma, your father is deeply in love with this woman. Even with these photos, there's a chance he'll react badly, get defensive, maybe even blame you for invading her privacy. But I know it's not fair, but love makes people irrational. We need to be prepared for any reaction. So what do you suggest?" Grandma thought carefully. "We need more than just evidence. We need Victoria to expose herself, to show your father who she really is in a way that can't be denied or rationalized." "How do we do that?" A small, determined smile crossed Grandma's face. "We set a trap." Over the next 2 weeks, Grandma and I crafted our plan. Grandma would call Dad and tell him she'd been diagnosed with a serious health issue. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to require family support. She'd ask if he could help her with some financial matters, maybe even move in with us temporarily while she recovered. It was a test. We knew Victoria would react negatively to the idea of Grandma moving in. After all, Grandma was the one person who saw through her act. Having her in the house would be Victoria's worst nightmare. But more importantly, we predicted Victoria would escalate her timeline. If she thought there was a risk of Grandma exposing her, she'd move faster. And when people move faster, they get sloppy. Dad took the news about Grandma exactly as expected, with immediate concern and an offer to help in any way he could. Of course Mom can stay with us, for as long as she needs, he told Grandma over the phone. I watched Victoria's face as Dad relayed the conversation to her that evening. For just a split second, her mask slipped. I saw anger, fear, calculation. Then the mask returned. Of course, Victoria said, her voice syrupy sweet. Family comes first. We'll set up the guest room for her. But I saw her hands clench into fists at her sides. 2 days later, I intercepted a call on the house phone. It was Marcus, Victoria's affair partner. He'd called the landline instead of her cell, a mistake on his part. Hello, I answered. Oh, is Victoria there? A man's voice said, confused. May I ask who's calling? There was a pause. Just a colleague. Tell her Marcus called. Sure thing, I said sweetly. I'll let her know. I didn't tell her. Instead, I added the phone number to my evidence folder. That evening, Victoria seemed on edge. She kept checking her phone, her jaw tight. When Dad asked if everything was okay, she snapped at him, the first time I'd seen her do that. I'm fine, she said sharply, then caught herself. Sorry, just stressed about work. Dad accepted the explanation, but I saw Daniel glance at me, a question in his eyes. Later that night, I told Daniel everything. I'd been protecting him from the truth, thinking he was too young to handle it. But he was 16 now. He deserved to know. We sat in my room, door locked, and I showed him everything. The photos, the emails, the timeline, the affair. Daniel's face went through a journey of emotions: shock, anger, betrayal, and finally, determination. What do we do? He asked. We wait. Grandma's moving in next week. That's when Victoria will make her move. And then we expose her. In front of Dad, in front of everyone. We make sure she can't lie her way out of this. Daniel nodded slowly. I'm in, whatever you need. Having my brother on my side felt like gaining an ally in war, which in many ways this was. The following week, Grandma moved into our guest room. Victoria's smile stayed plastered on her face, but I could see the strain behind it. That evening, I caught Victoria on the phone in the backyard, her voice low and urgent. I crept closer, recording on my phone. I can't do this much longer, she was saying. His mother is here now, watching everything. I need to move up the timeline. No, I know it's risky, but I don't have a choice. Next month, I'll initiate the divorce next month. She was talking to Marcus. Once I'm out, we can be together. And trust me, the settlement will be worth the wait. I know, baby, I miss you too. I had it all on recording. The trap was set. The evidence was overwhelming. Now we just had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. And that moment was coming sooner than I expected. With Grandma in the house, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. It was subtle at first. The way Victoria's smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. How she'd excuse herself from family dinners early, claiming headaches or work that needed finishing. But Grandma was brilliant. She played her role perfectly. The sweet, recovering mother who needed help but wasn't invasive. She'd ask Victoria innocent questions that made Victoria uncomfortable. Questions about her teaching job, her family in Oregon, her past. You know, Victoria dear, Grandma said one evening over dinner, you've never really told us much about your life before you met David. What was your maiden name again? Victoria's fork paused midway to her mouth. Peterson. Why do you ask? Oh, no reason, just curious. And you were married once before, weren't you? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Dad looked surprised. You were? You never mentioned that. Victoria's laugh sounded forced. It was very brief, years ago, hardly worth mentioning. It ended amicably. Grandma smiled sweetly. That's good to hear. Divorce can be so messy. I saw Victoria's knuckles turn white around her fork, but she maintained her composure. Barely. After dinner, I helped Grandma to her room. She closed the door behind us and grinned. "Did you see her face?" Grandma whispered. "She knows I'm onto her. She's going to crack soon." "How can you be sure?" "Because people like Victoria operate on control. When they feel that control slipping, they panic. And when they panic, they make mistakes." Grandma was right. 2 days later, Victoria made her first major mistake. I came home from college classes to find Victoria in Dad's home office, going through his filing cabinet. She was so focused that she didn't hear me approach. "Looking for something?" I said. Victoria spun around, her face flushed. "Emma, God, you startled me." "What are you doing in Dad's office?" "Just looking for some insurance papers, for my doctor's appointment." "Insurance papers are in the kitchen drawer. Dad keeps all medical stuff there." Victoria's eyes flickered with something cold. "Right, I forgot." She walked past me, her shoulder deliberately bumping mine. The mask was cracking. That evening, I checked Dad's office. Several financial documents were out of place. She'd been photographing them. I found a few papers slightly askew, the kind of disarray you get when you're rushing to document something. She was building her own case against Dad, creating evidence for the divorce she was planning. I texted Grandma, "She's preparing her attack, soon." Grandma's response was immediate. "Then we move first, this weekend. Saturday dinner. Invite your father's closest friends and his brother. We expose her in front of witnesses." The plan was set. But Victoria wasn't done yet. On Thursday evening, I overheard an argument between Dad and Victoria. I was upstairs, but their voices carried through the vents. "Your mother needs to leave, Victoria. This is our home, David, not hers." "She's sick, Victoria. She needs family support." "She's manipulating you. Can't you see that? She's been trying to turn you against me since day one." "That's not true." "It is true. And your daughter is just as bad. Emma has been hostile to me from the beginning. She resents me for replacing her mother." My hands balled into fists. "How dare she?" "Victoria, that's enough," Dad said, his voice firm. "Emma has been nothing but welcoming to you, and my mother deserves respect." "Respect?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "You want to talk about respect? You're never home, David. You work constantly. You leave me alone in this house day after day. Do you know how lonely that is? How neglected I feel?" She was following her script, building her narrative of emotional neglect. "I work to provide for this family. You work to avoid this family, and now you bring your mother here to spy on me, to judge me, to make me feel unwelcome in my own home?" There was a long silence. Then Dad's voice, quieter now. "Victoria, what's really going on here?" "Nothing. Forget it. I'm going to bed." I heard footsteps, then a door. He looked at me for a long moment. "What does that mean?" "It means come to dinner on Saturday. Grandma's organizing a family gathering. Uncle James is coming, the Richardsons from next door. Just come, please." Dad nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll be there." Friday was the calm before the storm. Victoria barely spoke to any of us. She stayed in her room most of the day, on her phone constantly. I knew she was talking to Marcus, planning her next move. That evening, she approached me in the kitchen. "Emma," she said, her voice cold and measured, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." "About what?" "About the fact that you've been going through my things, invading my privacy." My heart skipped. She knew. But I kept my face neutral. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play games with me," Victoria hissed. "I know you were on my laptop. I know you've been watching me. And I know you've been poisoning your father against me." "If anyone's been poisoning this family, Victoria, it's you." Her eyes narrowed. "Careful, little girl. You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually, I think I do. Victoria Peterson, or should I say Victoria Hendricks? Or was it Victoria Carlson? Hard to keep track of all your identities. Her face went pale. You. I know everything, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I know about your previous marriages, about Marcus, about your little plan to divorce Dad and take him for everything he's worth. I know it all. Victoria's expression shifted from shock to something darker, something dangerous. You have no proof. Don't I? We stared at each other, two players in a deadly game. Then Victoria smiled. It was the coldest smile I'd ever seen. You think you're so clever, she said softly, but you're just a naive child. Even if you have evidence, do you really think your father will believe you over me? I'm his wife. You're just his bitter daughter who never accepted me. Who do you think he'll choose? I guess we'll find out, I said. Victoria leaned in close. If you try to expose me, I will destroy this family. I will make sure your father loses everything. I will make him look like an abusive husband. I will take Daniel away from him. I have connections, Emma, lawyers, friends in social services. I can make your lives a living hell. So I suggest you keep your mouth shut and let things play out the way I've planned. She was threatening us, actually threatening us. But instead of fear, I felt something else, clarity. This woman had underestimated me, underestimated all of us, and that would be her biggest mistake. See you tomorrow at dinner, Victoria, I said calmly. She stared at me for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. I immediately texted Grandma and Daniel. She knows we're on to her. Tomorrow is our only chance. It has to be tomorrow. That night, I barely slept. Tomorrow would determine everything. Tomorrow we would either save our family or watch it burn. But I was ready. Victoria had taught me something valuable. Sometimes, to protect the people you love, you have to be willing to fight dirty. And I was ready to fight. Saturday arrived with deceptive calm. The morning sun filtered through our kitchen windows like any other weekend. But the air was thick with tension, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. Victoria came downstairs dressed impeccably, a dove-gray dress, pearl earrings, her hair styled perfectly. She was preparing for battle, I realized. She knew something was coming. Dad was in the backyard setting up tables for the dinner party. Uncle James would arrive at 5, along with the Richardsons and a few of Dad's close colleagues from work. 12 people total, all witnesses to what was about to unfold. Need any help with dinner? Victoria asked Grandma, her voice saccharine. Grandma smiled. That's sweet of you, dear, but I've got it covered. The hours crawled by. Daniel and I exchanged nervous glances across the house. Everything was ready. The laptop with Victoria's emails was charged and waiting. The printed documents were in a folder hidden in Grandma's room. The recording of Victoria's phone conversation was queued up on my phone. At 4:35, I showered and changed. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I'd aged years in the past few months. My eyes had lost some of their innocence. They looked harder now. Victoria looked at Dad, her eyes wide and wounded. David, are you going to let her talk to me like this? Dad looked confused, torn. Mom, maybe this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I said, standing up. All eyes turned to me. Because Victoria's been lying to all of us from the very beginning. Victoria's face twisted with fury. You little... Emma, what's going on? Dad asked, alarm creeping into his voice. I pulled out my phone. I think everyone should hear this. I pressed play on the recording. Victoria's voice filled the room, crystal clear. I can't do this much longer. His mother is here now, watching everything. I need to move up the timeline. Next month, I'll initiate the divorce next month. Once I'm out, we can be together. And trust me, the settlement will be worth the wait." The room was dead silent. Dad's face had gone pale. What is that?" "That's your wife," I said, my voice shaking but strong, "talking to her boyfriend Marcus about her plan to divorce you and take your money." "That's not—" Victoria started. "There's more," I interrupted. I nodded to Daniel, who brought out Victoria's laptop. "We found these emails," Daniel said, opening the computer. He turned the screen toward Dad. "She's been planning this for months, maybe longer." Dad stood slowly, walking around the table to look at the screen. I watched his face as he read the emails, the affair messages, the communications with the divorce attorney, the spreadsheets tracking his finances. "David, I can explain," Victoria said, her voice desperate now. "They're taking things out of context. They've been spying on me, invading my privacy." "Is it true?" Dad asked, his voice hollow. "Are you having an affair?" Victoria's mouth opened and closed. It's not what it looks like." "Answer the question," Dad said, his voice rising. "Are you having an affair?" Tears sprang to Victoria's eyes. "Yes, but David, you have to understand. You've been so distant, so focused on work. I was lonely. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Dad's voice cracked. "You've been planning to divorce me for months. You've been documenting my finances, building a case against me. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated." Uncle James stood up. "David, maybe we should—" "No," Dad said. "Everyone stays. I want witnesses to this." He turned back to Victoria, and I saw something I'd never seen in my father before. Pure, cold fury. "How long?" he asked. "How long have you been planning this?" Victoria's tears were flowing now, but they looked fake, practiced. "Please, David, can we talk about this privately?" "How long?" he roared. Grandma stood up, pulling out the manila folder. "I can answer that." She opened it, spreading the documents across the table. "Victoria has done this before, twice. She targets widowers, men who are vulnerable and grieving. She marries them, stays long enough to establish financial claims, then divorces them and walks away with settlements. You're her third mark, David." The room erupted. Robert and Catherine were staring in shock. The Richardsons looked horrified. Uncle James was shaking his head in disbelief. Dad picked up the documents, reading through them with shaking hands. I saw him find the court records from Victoria's previous divorces, the accusations from her ex-husbands, the pattern. You... He couldn't find words. Victoria was backing toward the door now. "I don't have to listen to this. You're all ganging up on me. This is abuse." "You threatened us," I said loudly, "yesterday. You told me that if we exposed you, you'd destroy Dad, that you'd make him look abusive, that you'd take Daniel away from him, that you had connections in social services." Uncle James' lawyer instincts kicked in. "Victoria, did you say those things? She's lying. Are you willing to say that under oath?" Victoria grabbed her purse from the counter. At the doorway, she turned back one last time. "You'll regret this," she said coldly. "All of you." "The only regret," Grandma said, "is that we didn't see through you sooner." Victoria left, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Dad collapsed into his chair, his head in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. I went to him, wrapping my arms around him. Daniel joined us. Grandma put her hand on Dad's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," Dad whispered. "I'm so sorry. I brought her into our home. I trusted her with everything. I almost let her destroy us." "You didn't know," I said gently. "She's done this before. She's a professional. None of this is your fault." "But I should have seen it. I should have—" "Dad," Daniel said, his voice firm, "stop. We got her. She's gone. We're still here. We're still a family." The Richardsons quietly excused themselves, as did Robert and Catherine, offering support but giving us space. Uncle James stayed, immediately switching into lawyer mode, discussing restraining orders, divorce proceedings, asset protection. That night, after everyone had left and we'd cleaned up the remnants of the dinner party, the four of us, Dad, Daniel, Grandma, and I, sat in the living room. "How did you know?" Dad finally asked. "When did you figure it out?" I told him everything, about Grandma's investigation, about what I'd found on Victoria's laptop, about the threats, about the plan to expose her. Dad listened, his face a mixture of pride and pain. "You saved us," he said, looking at me and Daniel. "You both saved this family. We almost lost you. We almost let her take you from us." Dad pulled us both into a fierce hug. "Never. You could never lose me. I'm sorry I was blind. I'm sorry I put you through this." Grandma wiped her eyes. "David, you wanted love. You wanted happiness. There's no shame in that. The shame is all hers." We stayed up late that night, talking, crying, healing. It was the first honest conversation we'd had in over a year. Victoria had tried to tear us apart. Instead, she'd made us stronger than ever. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, paperwork, and emotional recovery. Uncle James moved quickly. By Monday morning, we had restraining orders filed against Victoria. By Tuesday, divorce papers were served. By Wednesday, Dad had changed all the locks on the house and removed Victoria's name from every account, every document, every piece of his life. Victoria hired her own lawyer, of course. She tried to fight for alimony, for a settlement, for anything she could get. But Uncle James was relentless. He filed counterclaims for fraud, for emotional distress, for the money she'd stolen from Dad's wallet over the months. He contacted her previous ex-husbands, building a case for a pattern of predatory behavior. Victoria's lawyer eventually advised her to take a minimal settlement and disappear rather than risk criminal charges. She took the advice. 2 months after the dinner party confrontation, the divorce was finalized. Victoria walked away with almost nothing, just her personal belongings and a small cash settlement that barely covered her lawyer fees. We found out later that Marcus, her boyfriend, had dumped her the moment he realized there would be no big payout. Apparently, he'd been in it for the money, too. They deserved each other. But the legal victory, while satisfying, didn't erase the damage Victoria had done. Dad struggled. He threw himself into therapy, trying to process the betrayal, the manipulation, the fact that he'd been fooled so completely. He had nightmares, he questioned his own judgment, he became paranoid about trusting anyone new. "How do I ever trust again?" he asked me one evening. We were sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset. "How do you know?" I said, honestly. "Not at first. Trust takes time. It's built slowly through actions and consistency and truth. But Dad, you can't let Victoria steal your ability to love. That's letting her win." He was quiet for a long time. "You grew up so much through this. Too much, maybe. You're 19 and you had to become a detective, a protector. You should have been at college parties, not gathering evidence against your stepmother. I don't regret it, not for a second. You would have done the same for me." He squeezed my hand. In a heartbeat. Daniel had his own struggles. At school, word got out about what happened. Small town, big gossip. Some kids thought it was cool, like something from a movie. Others whispered about our dysfunctional family. Daniel got into a fight with a kid who made a crude joke about Victoria. He came home with a black eye and a suspension. But he also came home with a new clarity about who he was and what mattered. "I'm done pretending to be okay when I'm not," he told me. "I'm done letting people treat our family like we're broken. We're not broken. We're survivors." He started going to therapy too, started talking about his grief over Mom, his anger at Victoria, his fear of Dad never being happy again. It was hard, painful work, but he was healing. We all were. Grandma moved back to her own house after 3 months. Before she left, she pulled me aside. "You know what I'm most proud of?" she said. "What?" "That when you discovered the truth, you didn't let anger consume you. You stayed strategic, you stayed smart. You protected your family without destroying yourself in the process. That takes real strength, Emma, real character." "I learned from the best," I said, hugging her tight. "Your mother would be so proud of you. I hope you know that." Tears filled my eyes. "I hope so." About 4 months after the divorce, something unexpected happened. I was at the grocery store when I ran into one of Victoria's ex-husbands. His name was Stephen, and I recognized him from the documents in Grandma's folder. He recognized me too. Apparently, he'd followed the news about our case. "Emma?" he said hesitantly. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" We sat in the grocery store cafe, 2 victims of the same predator. "I wanted to thank you," Stephen said. "When I went through my divorce with Victoria, I felt insane. She made me doubt my own reality. She convinced everyone I was the bad guy, controlling, jealous, paranoid. My own friends stopped talking to me. But then your case went public, and suddenly people started asking questions about my divorce, started realizing maybe I wasn't crazy after all. "I'm sorry you went through that," I said. "Don't be sorry, be proud. You did what I couldn't do. You caught her, you exposed her, you saved your father from years of pain." He paused. "And you probably saved her next victim too. She won't be able to do this again, not easily anyway." That conversation stayed with me, because Stephen was right. We hadn't just saved our family, we'd stopped Victoria from doing this to someone else. That mattered. 6 months after the confrontation, things had settled into a new normal. Dad was dating again, cautiously, slowly, a woman named Claire who worked in his building. They'd been friends for years. She knew about Victoria. She knew about the pain. And she wasn't rushing anything. Just coffee dates and long conversations. Daniel had found a girlfriend, Sophie, a girl from his chemistry class who thought our family story was intense but kind of incredible. She was good for him, steady, kind, real. I'd gone back to college but came home most weekends. I'd changed my major to psychology with a focus on interpersonal manipulation and trauma. What we'd been through had given me a new purpose. I wanted to help other people recognize the signs of emotional predators. I wanted to make sure other families didn't have to go through what we did. Grandma was thriving. She'd started a blog about her experience, warning other widows and widowers about romance scammers and manipulators. It had gained a surprising following. She was getting hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories, asking for advice. "We're starting a movement," she told me proudly. "We're fighting back." One evening, about 8 months after everything happened, our family gathered for dinner, just the 4 of us. Dad, Daniel, Grandma, and me. No guests, no drama, just us. Dad raised his glass. "I want to make a real toast this time. To my family, to the people who saved me when I was too blind to save myself, to second chances, to truth, to love, real love, not the fake kind, and to the future, whatever it brings." We clinked glasses. "And to Mom," Daniel added quietly, "because I think she was watching over us through all of this." "To Mom," we echoed. After dinner, I went out to the backyard. It was a clear night, stars bright overhead. I looked up and thought about my mother, about what she'd want me to know. I think she'd want me to know that it's okay to trust again, that not everyone is a Victoria, that love and kindness still exist in the world, even when you've seen the worst of it. I think she'd want me to know that protecting your family doesn't mean becoming hard or cynical. It means being wise, but still keeping your heart open. And I think she'd want me to know that we're going to be okay. Bruised, yes. Changed, absolutely. But okay. The scars Victoria left would fade. The lessons would remain. We'd been through fire. We'd been tested. We'd been hurt. but we'd survived, and that made all the difference. A year after the confrontation, I found myself sitting in my dorm room staring at an email. It was from a woman named Jennifer. She'd found me through Grandma's blog. She said she thought her new husband might be hiding something. The signs were there. Small inconsistencies, mysterious phone calls, financial secrecy. She was asking for advice. I read her email 3 times, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. A year ago, I would have told her to trust her instincts, investigate, gather evidence. I would have given her the tactical approach, the strategy that worked for us. But a year of therapy, reflection, and healing had taught me something more nuanced. I wrote back, "Dear Jennifer, thank you for reaching out. I understand the fear and confusion you're feeling. That uncertainty is exhausting, I know. But before I give you advice about investigating your husband, I want you to ask yourself some questions. What is your gut telling you? Not your anxiety, not your fear, your deepest intuition. Is there real danger here, or are you processing past trauma?" The danger was real, but not every red flag is a Victoria. Sometimes a red flag is just a moment of human imperfection that needs communication, not investigation. Be wise, be careful, but also be open to the possibility that trust, even after betrayal, is still possible. You deserve to know the truth, but you also deserve to live without constant fear. Wishing you clarity and peace, Emma. I hit send and sat back, feeling like I'd finally found the balance between the caution Victoria taught me and the hope my mother would have wanted me to keep. That same week, I went home for Thanksgiving. The house felt different now, lighter. We'd repainted the living room, a warm honey color instead of the cold gray Victoria had chosen. Family photos covered the walls again. We'd reclaimed our space. Dad was in the kitchen with Claire, teaching her his famous pumpkin pie recipe. They were laughing, flour dusting their faces. It was domestic and sweet and normal. Daniel and Sophie were setting the table, arguing playfully about whether Thanksgiving needed a formal table setting or could be casual. Grandma was in her favorite chair, knitting and watching everyone with a satisfied smile. "Emma's here," Daniel called out when I walked in. Everyone erupted in greetings. Hugs were exchanged. Claire gave me a warm embrace, not trying too hard, just genuinely happy to see me. "Can we talk?" I asked Dad quietly. He nodded, wiping his hands on a towel. We went out to the back porch, just like we had so many times over the past year. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, about Victoria, about what she did to us, about what we did to stop her." Dad waited, giving me space to find my words. "I don't regret exposing her. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But I've been wondering, did we handle it the right way? The public confrontation, the witnesses, the way we destroyed her in front of everyone. Was that justice, or was that revenge?" Dad was quiet for a long moment. "I've thought about that too, and honestly, I think it was both, and I think that's okay." "How?" "Because Victoria was dangerous, not just to me, but to whoever her next target would have been. By exposing her publicly, by making sure everyone saw who she really was, we protected other people. That was justice. But yes, there was also satisfaction in watching her mask crack, in seeing her face the consequences of her actions. That was revenge. And after what she did to us, I think we earned the right to both." "But doesn't revenge just make us like her?" Dad shook his head firmly. "No, because we acted from a place of truth. We didn't lie, we didn't manipulate, we didn't falsely accuse. We simply revealed what was already there. Victoria created her own downfall. We just held up the mirror." I considered this. Uncle James said something similar. He said the difference between justice and revenge is intent. If you're trying to protect and prevent harm, that's justice. If you're trying to cause suffering for suffering's sake, that's revenge. And what was our intent? To protect you, to save our family, to stop her from doing this to someone else. "Then we chose justice," said Dad. "The fact that it also felt good, that's just a bonus." We both laughed, the first real laugh we'd shared about the whole situation. You know what the therapist told me last week? She said that people who've been through what we've been through have two choices: become bitter and closed off, or become wiser and more discerning. She said the key is learning to trust again without being naive, to be open but without being vulnerable to predators. I forgive you for bringing Victoria into our lives, for not seeing the signs sooner, for putting us at risk even though you didn't mean to. I forgive you. Dad's eyes filled with tears. Emma, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know that I don't blame you, and I need you to stop blaming yourself. He pulled me into a tight hug. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. That night, we gathered around the Thanksgiving table, our rebuilt, reclaimed family, plus the new people we'd cautiously let in. Before we ate, Dad asked if he could say something. 2 years ago, he began, I thought I'd lost everything. When your mother died, Emma and Daniel, I felt like I'd never be whole again. Then I met Victoria, and I thought she was the answer to my grief. I thought she was my second chance at happiness. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. I was wrong. Victoria wasn't my second chance. You were. This family, this table, the love we have for each other, that was always my second chance. I just got distracted by someone who promised me shortcuts to healing. But there are no shortcuts. There's only the hard work of staying present, staying honest, staying connected to the people who truly matter. Daniel reached over and squeezed Dad's hand. So I'm grateful today, Dad continued, not for what we went through, but for what we learned, for how it made us stronger, for how it taught us to value what's real and reject what's fake. And I'm grateful for second chances, real ones, not false ones, the kind that come from love, not manipulation. Amen to that, Grandma said, raising her glass. We all raised our glasses, looking around the table at each other, scarred, wiser, stronger. To second chances, we said together, and to truth, I added, and to family, Daniel finished. We drank, we ate, we laughed. We told stories and made jokes and enjoyed being together without the shadow of Victoria's lies hanging over us. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed in my old room, I found something I'd forgotten about, a journal I'd kept during the worst of the Victoria situation. I flipped through the pages, reading my younger self's fears and suspicions and anger. On the last page, I'd written something the day after the confrontation. I don't know if we'll ever fully recover from this. I don't know if Dad will ever be the same. But I know one thing for certain. We fought for each other. We protected each other. We refused to let evil win. And that has to count for something. Reading it now, a year later, I realized something important. We had recovered. Not completely. Some scars never fully fade. But we'd healed enough to move forward, to trust again, to love again, to be a family again. The thing about betrayal is that it teaches you what you're made of. It shows you what you'll do when pushed to your limits. It reveals your strength in the darkest moments. Victoria tried to destroy us. Instead, she showed us how powerful we were when we stood together. And that's a lesson worth remembering. If you're listening to this story and you see yourself in it, if you've been betrayed, manipulated, lied to by someone you trusted, I want you to know something. It's not your fault. Predators like Victoria are professionals. They study human psychology. They know how to exploit grief, loneliness, hope. They're skilled at appearing trustworthy while slowly undermining your reality. The fact that you were fooled doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. It makes you someone who wanted to believe in goodness. Don't let their evil steal that from you. But also, trust your instincts. When something feels off, even if you can't explain it, pay attention. Your subconscious often picks up on inconsistencies before your conscious mind does. Those small moments of discomfort, those nagging doubts, they matter. You don't have to become paranoid. You don't have to investigate everyone who enters your life. But you should give trust slowly, in increments, based on consistent behavior over time. Real love proves itself through actions, not just words. Real love is patient with your questions. Real love doesn't rush you or manipulate you or punish you for having boundaries. If someone tries to isolate you from family and friends, that's a red flag. If someone tries to control your finances while claiming it's for your own good, that's a red flag. If someone's stories don't add up but they get angry when you ask for clarification, that's a red flag. Pay attention to how someone treats service workers, how they talk about their exes, how they respond when you say no. Character reveals itself in small moments, not just grand gestures.
And if you discover you're in a situation like ours, if you realize someone has been lying to you, using you, planning to harm you, here's what I learned. First, gather evidence before confronting them. Manipulators are skilled at denial and gaslighting. You need proof that can't be explained away. Second, build a support system before you act. Tell people you trust what's happening. Don't face it alone. Third, prioritize safety. If someone has threatened you or you feel physically unsafe, get out first and handle the legal stuff later. No amount of money or pride is worth your life. Fourth, accept that closure might not come in the way you expect. Victoria never apologized. She never showed remorse. She just left. And at first, that felt unsatisfying. But I've learned that closure comes from within. It comes from knowing you protected yourself and the people you love. It comes from moving forward despite the pain. And finally, healing takes time. You don't just get over betrayal. You process it. You work through it. You let yourself feel angry, sad, confused. You go to therapy. You talk to people who understand. You give yourself permission to heal at your own pace. 1 year later, I still have moments when I doubt my judgment, when I wonder if I'm seeing red flags that aren't there, when I question whether someone's kindness is genuine or calculated. But I'm learning to balance wisdom with openness, to be cautious without being cynical, to protect myself without closing off my heart. Daniel is thriving now. He made the varsity baseball team. He has a girlfriend who genuinely cares about him. He's talking about colleges, about the future, with excitement instead of fear. Dad is building a life with Claire. They're taking things slow, but it's real, it's healthy. And watching him laugh again, watching him trust again, fills me with hope. Grandma continues her blog, helping hundreds of people recognize and escape from similar situations. She's turned her pain into purpose. And me? I'm studying to become a therapist specializing in trauma from emotional manipulation. I want to help people who've been through what we went through. I want to use my experience to heal others. That's what you can do with pain. You can let it destroy you, or you can transform it into something meaningful. We chose transformation. So here's the moral of this story, the lesson I hope you take away. Evil exists. Manipulation exists. There are people in this world who will try to use your kindness against you, but love also exists. Truth exists. There are people who will stand beside you when everything falls apart, who will fight for you when you can't fight for yourself. The key is learning to recognize the difference. Trust, but verify. Love, but protect yourself. Hope, but stay grounded in reality. And most importantly, never give up on the people who matter. Family, whether blood or chosen, is worth fighting for. Victoria tried to tear our family apart with lies, but we held on to each other with truth. And truth is always, always stronger than lies. The scars remain, the memories linger, but we're still here. We're still standing. We're still a family, and that's our victory. To anyone out there dealing with a similar situation, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not weak for having trusted someone who betrayed you. You're strong for surviving. You're brave for seeking truth. You're resilient for continuing to hope despite the pain. And you will get through this, I promise. Because here's what I've learned. The human heart is remarkably resilient. It can break and heal over and over again. It can be scarred and still love. It can be betrayed and still trust. That's not weakness. That's the most powerful kind of strength there is. My stepmother's lies nearly tore our family apart. Nearly, but nearly isn't the same as actually. We saved ourselves. We saved each other. We chose truth over comfort, reality over denial, love over fear. And in the end, that made all the difference. So if you're facing your own battle right now, if you're dealing with your own version of Victoria, remember this: you're stronger than you think, you're braver than you feel, and you're not alone. The truth will set you free. It might hurt like hell first. It might turn your world upside down. It might cost you things you thought you couldn't live without. But on the other side of that pain is peace, clarity, freedom, strength, and a life built on truth, no matter how imperfect, is always better than a life built on lies, no matter how comfortable. We made it through. You will too. Hold on to the people who love you. Trust your instincts. Stand up for truth. Fight for what matters. And never, ever let anyone steal your capacity for hope. Because hope, real, grounded, wise hope, is what keeps us human. It's what keeps us fighting. It's what keeps us believing that better days are ahead. And they are. I promise you, they are. This is Emma, signing off. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you in yours. Remember, you are loved, you are valued, you are worth fighting for, and the truth will always, always win in the end.